Can I have your attention, please? Let me bring to you our committee today. Statewide Transportation Planning, Strategic Planning Committee is called to order. And I believe our speaker today is Janine Miller, State Planning Director, and there she is.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman. I hope you can hear me okay. All right. It is a delight to be able to speak with you today, as it always is, but particularly because today's topic is freight. In case you haven't heard, Georgia is a freight state, and we have a lot of it moving. We also have a lot of activities underway to support all that movement, freight movement, including planning and activities to advance construction on projects, and I'm going to talk with you about that today. But in particular, go ahead and advance that. Today's topic is the recent deliverable. We published it and delivered it as instructed per state law, the Freight and Logistics Implementation Plan and Annual Report per House Bill 617 that was passed last session and approved by Governor Kemp in May. I'll give you a little background first, kind of starting with why, as well as some history, talk with you about the legislation, and then the report and plan itself. As a background, as being a freight state, we're also, for the 11th year in a row, been named Georgia as the #1 state for business. We went back and did a tally. We worked with the Department of Economic Development so we could understand just how important logistics-enabled companies have been to Georgia's position over more than a decade now. We found that since Governor Kemp took office in January of 2019, there's been $87.7 billion of private investment announced in Georgia. $66.1 billion, or more than 3/4 of that investment, is in logistics-enabled businesses, which committed to an announcement of more than 140,000 jobs. So at the time of announcement, that is a promise that is made to the department. And so we tallied this up. Now, logistics-enabled businesses could be in any industry, all the way from what you'd expect as a manufacturing plant to even recycling, so that as there's inbound cargo production or distribution happens within the facility, and then there's outbound cargo to a customer, that is a logistics-enabled company. Most of it is by truck, some of it is by rail, but overall these are impressive numbers and an imperative, I believe, for us in operating transportation infrastructure. So you can see the breakdown by 3 key industries. Manufacturing and automotive is the bulk of that. About 70% of the private investment is in manufacturing and automotive in the past 6 years. And then agribusiness and food processing is also, of course, very critical to the state. Logistics and distribution has grown tremendously over this period of time. We know that these are our customers, our existing industries, and those that are businesses that have stood up recently and have announced their establishment and expansion here in Georgia. So going back also to 2004 is when we started doing freight planning here at the department. This precedes my arrival, but this was with the support of the State Transportation Board. So this body has been very instrumental in creating an important foundation for great freight infrastructure over the past 20 years. It also was a key focus of Governor Perdue's Commission for New Georgia with the Freight and Logistics Task Force, which led to a freight plan kickoff in 2010, published in 2011, that won an award in 2012 by the U.S. Department of Transportation and the American Planning Association. This was noted to be a good at least 5 years before the federal government required us to do a freight plan. We've looked ahead and been ahead, and we are still ahead. This 2018 was the first year that it was something that was required, and our plan at that point was winning awards from the American Trucking Associations. Fast forward to 2023, 2 years ago, we published our updated freight plan, federally compliant, certainly. We had a plethora, as you can see, of the logos of Georgia companies that we had the ability to interact with, to meet with, to glean their perspectives, and really how their businesses operate and how freight infrastructure is critical for their prosperity. And this is what we call our NASCAR slide, but it is truly an impressive group of shippers and carriers that gave us incredible insights into ways that our transportation infrastructure, particularly roads, can continue to support their business. We advanced freight strategies in agriculture, manufacturing, and distribution, and I want to show you a map that you may recall seeing before. This was again published for the first time 2 years ago. Typically, when we look at the map of the state routes, it's a black and white sort of map, maybe some grays here and there. You just see the network of our state routes. This unpacks our state routes by what industries use which corridors. Manufacturing is predominantly in the north and the east. Distribution is focused around Metro Atlanta, as well as those interstate connections to other ports and commerce areas around the southeast. And food and agriculture, of course, in the north and also in the south. This is really an incredible, I believe, representation of the importance of our roadway network for all industries. If you think about potentially, the epicenter that is Southwest Georgia agriculture, how important Metro Atlanta roadways are for that industry. How important the distribution is focused around Metro Atlanta, the population centers, how important I-16 and I-75 in the south part of the state are for those efficient movements of trucks and freight and cargo. What we also found a couple of years ago, and this is also has been something we've shown to the board here before, is separating by these industries what sort of growth we're going to be seeing over the next 25 years. In total, this is nearly a doubling of cargo moving through our state, mostly on truck in the blue, and then some of the other modes, including rail, is depicted in the green. But the sustained growth of distribution is really the big show here. Is going to be the big story for us, and this is in tonnage, millions of tons. This does not equate to number of trucks on the road or number of rail cars, just simply the tonnage that is broken down in different ways, and this is a pretty standard way of measuring freight flows, not just here in Georgia, but throughout the country. So with that backdrop, we then were introduced to the requirements in HB 617, which required a new sort of plan and called the Freight and Logistics Implementation Plan, and an annual report. So we took this 2024 state freight planning analysis that generated the last two documents with our federally compliant 2023 state freight plan and the requirements of 2024's HB 617, and created the Freight and Logistics Implementation Plan. It was really based on, thankfully, the law had a lot of components that we had already analyzed and published. So even though we really only had about 8 months to develop this implementation plan, we had a really, really firm foundation to build from, and then therefore also create a report for the annual report requirements. So first I'm going to go through what the statute tells us to do. Step one is create a 20-year projection there in paragraph A of discrete freight projects and programs. And then next, categorize the improvements by foundational, catalytic, and innovative. That is aligned with the State Strategic Transportation Plan that has been approved by of course, the governor, but certainly the State Transportation Board back in 2021. And I'll share with you what foundational, catalytic, and innovative means, both by our standards and by the way it's written in law. Then next step is to assign the key performance indicators, again, what those private sector carriers and shippers told us are important for their businesses and how we apply that to infrastructure analysis. And then lastly, identify projects and programs that are in defined economic impact zones. So I'll share those with you as well. The annual report was the next requirement in the law that enables us to take a look back at the year prior, just 1 year prior, budgetary proposal, this is pulled directly from the statute, of state funds needed to fully procure federal aid funds. Basically, that's the match needed for federal, for the freight projects. The status of the department's program to deliver added capacity, and then the status of projects in these categories, as you see here: widening of all sorts of roads, interchange improvements, intermodal rail crossing access, and parking and safety improvements, as well as those economic impact zones, once again. So with that as our directive, I'll now share with you what the Freight and Logistics Implementation Plan is telling us, that with an analysis, a very detailed and deliberative review of everything in GDOT's program over 20 years, we went through many filters and found the projects that are most impactful for freight. There are 306 location-specific projects. These are ones that have defined locations, but also have defined project stages. Have to start with PE, preliminary engineering, likely go through a right-of-way phase, and then on to construction. The other blue bars that you see here are our programs, just not location-specific, but meet projects and investments that meet programmatic criteria and managed by GDOT's offices in maintenance, bridge, safety, operations, and you can see we've got some indicated here by intersections and roundabout. We called those out, as well as ITS, and some planning and harbor. But the really exciting part here is the bulk of this that is maintenance. It doesn't sound very exciting, but I can assure you that this is absolutely critical for freight movement. The cost to fleet of poorly maintained roads is tangible. Not only the safety effects of rough pavement, but also the damage that occurs, not just to tires, but to all of the mechanics of a truck on roads that are not smooth, turns into the bottom line impacts for Georgia's companies. So we're very proud to have this degree of maintenance projects, this level of maintenance projects. So we also have a project list, and I want to call your attention to, we do have a booklet that we'll hand out to you. You'll see the project list here. It's about 5 pages worth of freight projects that we are investing in. That's the 306 here in the plan, and we'll hand a copy of those out to you at the end of this committee meeting. We were then asked, as I mentioned, to categorize into foundational, catalytic, and innovative, and of course, there are ways to also represent that for how businesses think about these types of investments. Foundational are things that just have to do to run the business, just to keep the lights on, to pay the employees, so to speak. In GDOT world, those are things like non-capacity projects, truck parking, local assistance projects, improving signals, and maintaining our facilities, our roadways, bridges. Catalytic investments, things that a company might do to grow the customer base. And that, for us, is about roadway capacity, as well as inland ports, helping with airport capacity as well, and even some of our local assistance programs help local governments with their capacity expansions and trying to keep up with the growth in population and freight. And then lastly, innovative is, in private sector, sort of in the space of research and development, things that we can help with our existing industries and give our world-class freight experience to our existing and new industries. So HB 617 also defined these, which align well with the way that we have already captured the FCI framework. So we had an ability to grab what we'd already done and capture that in the plan. The other third step after the 20-year project list, the FCI categorization, was to capture key performance indicators. And on the far right are the way that the performance indicators are basically able to be analyzed per HB 617. But once again, it goes back, we were able to draw back on our invaluable insights we received from private sector around reliability, speed. Let me clarify, speed is not over the speed limit. Speed is simply the velocity of origin to destination. Cost for shipping is multi-dimensional, but predominantly in congestion, costs, and safety. Risk, and then, of course, safety and security, just simply mitigated harm and liability issues. So the point here is, in addition, beyond all the words, is there's a lot of alignment with what the law required us to do with what we already have done. Step 4, though, was new for us, and that is the economic impact zones. There were several of those, the first one being international ocean trade zones. Any county in 20 miles, so basically we drew a 20-mile line outside of the Port of Savannah, and if it touched a county, we lit it up on the map. And so here are 22 projects you see that are in, I think that's 22 projects that are in the blue zones here around the Port of Savannah, and the Port of Brunswick qualifies international trade zones. We're making investments in these areas where trucks and businesses are growing. The next one is inland port zones. This is defined also in law, 10 miles around inland ports. And the ones that we have operating today include the Appalachian Regional Port and the Blue Ridge Connector, as well as the Bainbridge Terminal down in southwest Georgia. And the economic zones around commercial and industrial facilities, a 5-mile zone around any facility that has more than 200,000 square feet. Well, that's almost all of Georgia. Did I say Georgia's a freight state? It certainly is. 121 of 159 counties qualify for this status. And for those counties that don't, we also included them because these are also projects of economic significance, which was another criteria qualifier in the Freight and Logistics Implementation Plan. So that is the plan itself, as in what are the investments happening, why are we doing them, FCI, KPIs, and where are they occurring? The annual report is required to let the public know, stakeholders, elected officials, how we're doing. So again, this is the 1-year look back. There are projects here, in looking back in this year, worth $335 million that have been advancing, 45 of them in prior year, fiscal 2024. This is an important set of investments. These are projects that had any phases occurring in 2024, and predominantly are funded out of federal and state resources, although local dollars do come to the table, both from cities and counties there in the blue part of the pie chart, as well as TIA, the Transportation Investment Act, that is occurring through 4 regions in South Georgia. There's about $7 million of TIA projects going toward freight investments, which we're very excited about. We also have a way to depict the phases of the prior year's $335 million of investment, mostly in construction, but also a portion for PE, preliminary engineering and scoping, $59 million, right-of-way phases at $104, and TRIP, Towing Recovery Improvement Program, which is not necessarily an infrastructure project, but it is part of a program that is critical for keeping freight moving throughout the state of Georgia. And that concludes my presentation today, Chairman Golden.
Thank you, Janine. Appreciate the report. Very informative. Excellent job. Any questions from members of the committee for Janine? Gosh. No questions. Thank you, Janine. Madam Chair, our committee stands adjourned.
With that, the Finance Committee will have a budget update from Angela Whitworth, our treasurer. Angela?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Chairwoman, Chairman, members of the board, and the Commissioner. I'm here this afternoon to present the amended 25 and 26 budget recommendations. I will start off by saying, last month I kind of gave everybody the refresher on what we submitted way back in August and September to the governor. So this budget I'm going to present today is inclusive of the governor's recommendations. In the amended 25 budget thus far, we've had Senate changes to that. House changes to that. The Senate has not acted yet. Josh will be coming up with the Legislative Committee report next, and I believe the Senate's going to move on the amended next week. So I will highlight what the House changes are to the governor's. But I will start off by saying that, as you can see here, there's an additional $244,000 in excise being brought into the budget. At the bottom, you'll see there's an additional over $1 billion brought into the budget. I want to thank the governor and the House for that change. That is spread across several programs. It's spread across the freight program. It's spread across local roads assistance program. It's spread across GTIB, and it's also put in for some of our storm relief and the routine maintenance program. And I'll highlight that. In this next bar chart you see here, I've broken it out, and you can see that the capital projects make up roughly $1.4 billion of our budget. I moved for the amended 25, I moved local roads assistance out over into LMIG, so you can see what the overall impact is for locals, almost $500 million of funding that's going to the local governments. In routine maintenance, you can see an additional $734 million, which is layered in the $200 million for storm relief. And then you can see the freight program, the governor's added $530 million in there for freight. General operations is $301 million. And in general operations, that really consists of the administrative programs, data collections, traffic management, planning, and program delivery. In the GEO bond debt service, intermodal, payments to CERTA, and the ATL, all of those programs make up 3% or less of the overall budget. All right, I'll get into kind of the meat and potatoes of all the changes. In airport aid, there was an add of $7.5 million by the House. Originally in GTIB, the governor added $60 million to GTIB. The House took $7.5 million out of that recommendation and moved it into airport aid. What this does, it gives us the ability to touch 10 airports statewide, looking at capacity and safety projects throughout on those 10 airports. Also in capital construction, there was a little bit, almost $111 million added by the governor, and the House concurred. What that does, it gives us the additional capacity for projects. In capital maintenance, you'll see $100 million added to the budget. What this does, it helps offset the inflationary costs that we're seeing on all of our resurfacing projects. You've heard the commissioner talk about it several times. That's what those funds we utilize for. Data collections at the very bottom, that $9,000 is just there to help support our required federal requirements that we have in that program, the increases, so that's what that $9,000 is for. All right, on the next slide, departmental admin, you'll see an increase of $1 million. This is for IT and cybersecurity needs the department has. The LMIG, you'll see $24.4 million. That's truing up the 10% of excise calculation. And local roads admin, you can see that the governor and the House concurred, added $250 million to local roads, to the local roads program. There was no changes in planning. Ports and waterways, there was an additional $2.4 million. And what that is, it's the state share for the dike raising project in Savannah with the Corps of Engineers. And then lastly on this slide is program delivery with an increase of $1.6 million. And what this does is between the amended budget last year, when we layered in that additional $1.5 billion and this year's $1 billion, what this does is help with that program, with a much larger program to administer it. On the next slide, you'll see an additional $5 million. The House, the governor did not have that in his recommendation, but the House moved $5 million out of the GTIP program over into rail, and what this does is to help with the upgrade of the Class 2 standard. That's okay. Standard truck traffic to take truck traffic off the state highways. What that is, in order to meet Class 2 standards, you have to be able to carry 286,000 pounds, travel 25 miles an hour. We've had this program going on for several years now, so the additional $5 million will be utilized in that program. Next is routine maintenance. The additional $5.4 million is just for increased contracting and material costs. The big add to this program is the $200 million to help the department with the storm response costs that we've had. You know, we've had 2 hurricanes, we've had a flood, we've had 2 snowstorms, and we've already started briming this week. So these additional $200 million helps layer and helps help with the cost of that. And we will highlight, we're still doing storm recovery in South Georgia. Next is traffic management, $527,000 there. What this does is it helps us with the safety and technology improve. We're looking at for the permitting and trying to improve customer service in that area and driveway permits, reduce the number of days. I think the commissioners even talked about this several times in the hearings. What this funding is, it helps us with that initiative. There's no changes in the amended for transit. There was a $530 million ad by the governor for the new freight program that was added last year in the amended. The House concurred with this. It basically looks at, you know, just enhancing capital infrastructure projects throughout the state. Next is the payments to CERTA. The governor actually put in $60 million. The House reduced it to $37.5. Like I said, they took $7.5 million, moved it to airport aid. They took $5 million, moved it to rail. And then within the $37.5 million, they've carved out in the language that $7.5 million be utilized for non-federally eligible airport projects within that program. There was no changes to payments to the ATL, and that was all of the changes for the amended 25 thus far with the House. I'm waiting to hear back. We'll hear next week on the Senate changes. Any questions on the amended? Okay. Moving on into the 26 budgetation, we have an estimate of almost $275 million being added into excess based off the state economist's projection. There's an additional $9.6 million being added to the Transportation Trust Fund, and then additional $5.5 million being added to the Transit Trust Fund. What that does is that trues up the actual recommendation because those fees are based off actual collections from 24. So that trues up the numbers for that. And then lastly, you'll see a reduction in state general funds. And when we go through the slides, I'll highlight on this more, but it's primarily for the locomotive, the reduction in locomotive diesel not being exempted from the suspension on motor fuel. All right. The next bar chart, you'll see capital projects makes up over 50% of the overall budget, which is the $1.4 billion. Routine maintenance is 20% of our budget. General operations, you can see, makes up roughly 11%. And like I will highlight again this for some of our new board members coming on that are here today, like that is made of administrative, data collections, planning, program delivery, and traffic management. The local maintenance improvement grant program, you can see here, we're truing that up to be 10% of what the projection is for the excise. And then you have the GeoBond debt service, intermodal payments to CERTA, and ATL on. I will highlight for the new board members here today that in the intermodal program, that consists of rail, airport aid, transit, and ports and waterways. All right. Next up is, the next slide is, there's a reduction of $13.3 million. All this is us truing up our debt service. And airport aid, the additional whopping $633. That is reflective of our statewide changes that we had for like DOAS insurance and TeamWorks billing. In capital construction, there was an add of $107 million. This is just gives the department some additional capacity for projects. In capital maintenance, $110,000. Again, this just helps with the inflationary costs that we're seeing throughout all of our projects in the maintenance side. And then data collections at $12,000. That's just statewide changes that we're seeing in the federal reporting. On this next slide, in departmental admin, you'll see an additional $2.3 million. As I stated before, this is for some increased IT costs and cybersecurity that we're having to do. LMIG, we're truing up the LMIG program by bringing in the additional $27 million. In planning, the $6,500 that you see is just the statewide changes, like I mentioned, for DOES insurance. Ports and waterways, that $1,500 is for the statewide changes in DOES insurance and TeamWorks billing. Program delivery, the additional $4.1 million. It consists of us doing the increased larger program as well as those statewide changes that I've mentioned and the other programs. On this next slide, you can see in the rail program, there's a overall reduction of $4.8 million. $2,100 is for the statewide changes. The $4.8 million is actually the reduction for the collections for the locomotive. So that is what the reduction is there. And routine maintenance, the additional $33.6 million that you see there is just to help with increased contracting and material costs. Traffic management, that $8 million, what it does, it helps us support the districts in the TNC with the driveway permitting that we're doing, as well as the traffic control device permits. We're looking at hiring outside consultant labor to help us increase to do better customer service, so we can turn these permits around in a much quicker capacity than currently. In transit, you'll see the additional $5.5 million, and what this is, a portion of that goes to the ATL, and the remainder is a formula distribution that is spread throughout the state. The additional $4.8 million in transit, it basically helps fund the FTA program and provides the matching funds for the program. And then you'll see a $500,000 reduction, and what that is the removal of a one-time funding that they had for Chatham County last year, and so that's what that is coming out of the budget. On this next slide, payments to the ATL had no changes, and payments to CERTA had a $150 adjustment to our RV debt service. So as you can see from our budget recommendation, we've been extremely blessed in the amended budget with the additional $1 billion, waiting to see what the Senate does. And then 26, we actually had our House hearings last week, the commissioner did, and we have not had our Senate hearings yet on 26. So that's where we stand at this time. I'll be glad to answer any questions. Okay.
Madam Chair, may I make a statement?
Stacy? Oh, I'm sorry.
You're good. You're good.
Any other questions, comments for Angela?
May I make a statement?
Mr.
Thank you. I just wanted again to reaffirm our thanks to the governor for the additional state general funds in our budget. Again, foundationally and very importantly, the $200 million to routine maintenance to help us cover our costs that we have experienced on storm cleanup and are continuing to experience. In the interim, we do expect to get FEMA reimbursement at some point. We just don't know where that point is in time, so this is very important. So, again, I just wanted to say thank you again for the governor's recognition of these additional funds, the $250 million again to the cities and counties without match. And then obviously Janine just gave a compelling presentation of why freight investments imported and $530 million of state general fund money to advance freight projects so that she can deliver another robust report next year of doing good things to invest in freight in the economy in Georgia. So I just want to you know, a big thank you for that and for the House and the Senate, working with us and keeping these dollars in our budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Finance meeting is adjourned.
The Legislative Committee will now convene, and I will call on Josh Waller, the Director of Policy and Government Affairs, to provide us with the legislative update.
Thank you, Chairman Snipes, Madam Chair, members of the committee, full board, Commissioner. Glad to be here on this lovely February day, lovely-ish, I guess, to provide you with our federal and state update. Roadmap of what we're going to do with the General Assembly. We'll look at the calendar, committees, and then some key legislation. Federally, want to acknowledge the new secretary, and then just do a quick refresher on some federal terms around budget, appropriations, reconciliation, and reauthorization, all sorts of rolled into one there, just to kind of refresh. And as you hear headlines or see things, Congress doing that, you can kind of put it into context what this action is or that action, the other. So first is the legislative calendar. Today is February the 19th, and coincidentally, also Legislative Day 19. Now, I don't know if you saw the news, but early this morning, the Speaker came out of his office, looked around, went back into his office. Everyone around said he did see his shadow. So we
I knew that was
got
coming.
6 more weeks of session.
Yeah, that's, I knew that was coming.
Get the laughs in, get it out. Wake up, everybody. All right. So at the end of this week, we'll mark about the halfway point with session. We're about 2 weeks out from crossover day, which is the last day a bill has before it has to pass one chamber or the other. And then obviously, sine die is scheduled for April the 4th. Just a little bit of a recap. A lot of the main action has been with the Appropriations Committee, and you just heard from the Treasurer about the budget. So House has moved the amended out, so the subcommittee met. The full House passed it out on the 6th, 166-3. Made it over to the Senate where they had their committee meeting. The Appropriations Subcommittee met. Still, we haven't seen any, a bill probably sometime next week in the Senate on the amended. There was the first Transportation Committee meeting of the session occurred on the 11th, and then the 13th was a joint House full Transportation Committee and Appropriations Subcommittee meeting to look at the fiscal year 26 budget. I'll call your attention to the meeting on February the 11th actually took place in Capitol Room 341, which is a big room. And the reason that meeting had to be in the big room is the Transportation Committee now sits at 42 people, which next to Appropriations is the largest committee in the House. High demand. As you can look at all those members, you see a great cross-section of the state. I believe every one of you has at least one of your delegation members probably on the House Transportation Committee. And I've highlighted in red there's 10 members, kind of a net of 8 increase to the committee. The new ones are in red, and it's actually an interesting cross-section of you've got some newly elected officials. You've got some that were hired or were elected in special elections, and then you've had some that have served in the General Assembly for different tenures who had never served on transportation. So really, again, an interesting cross-section, and just goes to show how large that committee is. There's no committee room in the Legislative Office Building that could seat all of them. So that's why they had to have it in 341. Turning to highlighted legislation, we've got first up is House Bill 164, which is the truck weight bill introduced by Representative Stephen Meeks, and it is taking House Bill 189 from 2023 and just removing the sunset so that it would be in effect permanently. Makes no other changes to the weights or where it applies or the commodity it applies to. It's just removing the sunset. Next is House Bill 224 that kind of has been requested by the U.S. Department of Defense. And I'll just briefly say what it does is it allows for, it just authorizes, but it does not require the department to be able to go into an agreement with DOD to perform project management for roads on base. Now, you might be asking the question, why would this be necessary? State law, statute prohibits us from, the department cannot work on any road that's considered private, or if it's not open to the general public. Obviously, bases are not open to the general public. So that's why that exception had to be put into law. Again, I just underscore, if this were to become law, we would still have to work out an agreement. And there's a limitation, according to the bill, that only the funds have to come from DOD. So it couldn't be departmental funds, state funds. It would have to be DOD funds.
So we would just project manage it.
Correct. And I think the desire my understanding would add additional options for the Department of Defense in terms of how they can go about having projects on base managed. And I think they believe, in other states, they've tried to move this way. They believe there might be some efficiencies, but again, that would have to be determined down the line. The next three all deal with, I got 5 bills. The next 3 all deal with the school zone speed enforcement cameras, which you've probably seen some headlines about those. The first one is House Bill 225 by Representative Dale Washburn that would completely repeal the ability to permit and operate the speed zone cameras. The next one is Senate Bill 75, Senator Max Burns. It takes a little bit of a different tack. It adds additional signage requirements and lighting requirements, beacons, to indicate when the cameras are operational, and to further highlight if the school zone has a speed reduction, because not all school zones will have a 10 mile per hour speed reduction. So adds more signage and lighting restrictions. It then also restricts the time that it can operate. So right now it can theoretically go from when school's in to school's out. This would only allow for a 2-hour window around when school is 90 minutes before school starts, 30 minutes after school starts, then 30 minutes before school gets out, and 90 minutes after school gets out. So they could only operate in those 2 windows. Then the last one is Senate Bill 172, Senator Derek Mallow, which is basically the same thing as House Bill 225. Before I transition over to federal, are there any questions on the state side?
Yes, on those county speed zone bills, any feel or instinct which one might carry the day, if any?
Not at the moment. I think you'll see, usually one might pass one chamber and then gets to the other, and they, I wouldn't necessarily say one particular bill. There may be a compromise that comes out of this. I believe the speaker had mentioned early in the session a desire to at least see some change to the law where the revenue derived from that has to go back into the school system as a way of perhaps trying to right-size the incentive structure around those. And there's an AJC article today on their operations and analysis. And I'd point your attention to that if you hadn't seen it. Not the best guess I'd hazard at the moment. So next, turn to the federal. Want to first recognize the confirmation and swearing in of 20th U.S. Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy. You can see him there with the Associate Justice of the Supreme Court being sworn in. He was confirmed by the Senate on a vote of 77 to 22. So a strong bipartisan show of support for the new Secretary. So next, as I mentioned, I want to do a little bit of a refresher as you see different headlines about Congress passing a budget or appropriations or reconciliation. Just a reminder where we're situated in kind of the order of things. So the current federal fiscal year we're in now that began on October 1st is still operating on a continuing resolution. And we are operating on the funding levels from federal fiscal year 24, and that expires on March the 14th. On March the 14th, Congress will need to make a decision whether they're going to extend the CR, do an omnibus appropriation where they, or regular order passing all the appropriations bill separately to fully fund the government, or another scenario that's been talked about would be that they do a year-long CR and just take and extend the current continuing resolution through the end of the fiscal year. So that's the current fiscal year. Obviously, it's got implications how that plays out, but you then have concurrent with that, on March the 4th, the President will address Congress. Either that day or shortly thereafter, he'll submit a budget to the Congress, and that'll begin the process for the federal fiscal year 26 budget. So you'll still have federal 25 that needs to be resolved when 26 starts being talked about. And then what's probably the big headline right now that you see is the term budget reconciliation. And that is a process that sort of exists parallel to the traditional budget process. Reconciliation is usually, it's a couple of things about it. I'm not going to I left that slide deck upstairs of 10, 20 slides explaining what reconciliation is, so you can thank me for that later. In a nutshell, it can be used once a fiscal year, and it's a process whereby, while trying to save money or spend money, Congress can change the law in a way that affects the budget. And that law, the way they do that, the key thing is it only requires a simple majority in the United States Senate. For most things, almost all things except confirmations of judges and appointments, the Senate requires 60 votes to end debate and go to a vote. So reconciliation is the way that usually you've got the president, the presidency, the House, and Senate are all of one party, but the Senate, you don't have 60 of one party. So reconciliation becomes a once a fiscal year tool that can be used to make some policy changes that aren't going to be subject to the filibuster. So you'll see headlines about that. So that process is going on, again, in tandem with the federal fiscal year we're in now, and soon to be the discussion about next fiscal year. Overlay on top of that is with transportation, you got the annual appropriations process, is the U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Highway, and their ability to even disperse funds, all the programs that are allowed under law are a part of the authorization. You're all familiar with the IIJA. That's our current 5-year authorization. You can see on this chart where we got about a little less than 2 years to go on it. It expires next year. So also Congress, you'll see in the committees of jurisdiction, are beginning that conversation. So I'll talk about a few of those. On the House side, you got the you got the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, and we got 2 Georgians on that committee. Congressman Mike Collins, who's also the chairman of the subcommittee on Water Resources and Environment. And that's a critical committee that's involved in the Water Resources Development Act, dealing with ports, Corps of Engineers. So it's really exciting for Georgia to have him as chairman of that. And then Congressman Hank Johnson is also on the committee. In the House, this is the primary committee that does the work for transportation, surface transportation reauthorization. In the Senate, the work's divided among 3 different committees. The one that probably has the lion's share of federal highway projects, environmental components and issues is the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works. And you also have the Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation that has some programs within USDOT, but then a lot of the grant programs are through them. Then the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, they handle the transit portion of reauthorization. And in the Senate, we have Senator Raphael Warnock served on that committee. So just to give you a sense, because you're going to start seeing headlines about that, they're already having committees. You may see a commissioner, a head of a DOT, at some point talking to one of these committees on national TV, no doubt. So just giving you that context, we're approaching that window where Congress is really going to want to begin to get that work done. So with that, hopefully that's a little bit, just enough refresher that when you see a few headlines, you can kind of situate it. With that concludes my presentation.
Any questions for Josh? All right, then no questions. Committee stands adjourned.
At this time, I'll ask Haral Patel to come forward to give us an update on 285.
Thank you, Chairman Bowen. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board and Commissioner. It is my pleasure here to be today to provide you an update on I-285 Express Lanes. So this presentation will cover information on our regional MOU, Memorandum of Agreement between regional partners, our procurement plans for I-285 Express Lanes, and also status of I-285 East Express Lane project. So this week, our evaluators has achieved a milestone accomplishment on this project. They completed a review of statements of qualification. So towards the end of this presentation, I will provide you with the results of this review. So I-285 express lanes are intended to be a multimodal transportation option, which supports the current transit operation and also inclusion of the future transit operations. Just to support this vision, in May 2022, a historic MOU was signed between 8 signatories, GDOT, CERTA, ATL, MARTA, and 4 metro Atlanta counties, Gwinnett, Cobb, DeKalb, and Fulton. The goal is to enhance transit operation by using express lane corridor, by exploring possibilities for the new stations along and adjacent to I-285 corridor. This effort is also inconsistent with approved master transit plan for Fulton and DeKalb County. So with this multimodal partnership, there is a study underway currently to determine station locations and also conceptual design. So transit vehicles will operate toll-free in express lanes, and that will improve efficiency of the existing services and also provide efficiency for the future services. And it will also promote transit-oriented development in the corridor. So with that, our I-285 express lane procurement plan is to have 2 separate public-private partnership procurement. One is highlighted in blue on your screen, I-285 East Express Lane. So the limits for this procurement will be approximately from Northside Drive to I-20 on east side. And second one will be from I-285 West Express Lane from Northside Drive to I-20 on west side, which is highlighted in yellow on your screen. So as you know, our culture at GDOT, we strive to thrive on collaboration and innovation. So with that foundation, prior to deciding our approach for I-285 express lane delivery, we reached out to P3 Industry to gather information via request for information. The purpose of this RFI to receive feedback on our procurement approach and as well as commercial terms. So as expected, we received a great outcome from the industry on our RFI. And we also held multiple one-on-one meetings with industry partners. And this meeting helped us to gain insight on market condition and industry expectations. So after that extensive research and industry collaboration, the department decided to take hybrid procurement approach provided under Georgia Code Section 32-2-80. So under this procurement approach, there will be a Phase 1 agreement and CDA, Comprehensive Development Agreement. Phase 1 agreement will provide a developer to design, build, finance, operate, and maintain Phase 1 of the project. And CDA will provide responsibility to develop and deliver remaining phases of the project. In May 2024, this board approved this delivery approach for I-285 East Express Lane project. So on your screen, the dotted blue line, that's the limit for I-285 East Express Lane project. So from Northside Drive to I-20 on east side. This includes a total centerline 30 miles of 2 barrier-separated express lanes in each direction, as well as multiple express lane connections. So to make it more achievable, we decided to deliver this project in multiple phases, with the goal that each phase will provide operational efficiency as well as good customer experience. So with that goal in mind, our Phase 1 for I-285 East Express Lane project is highlighted in pink on your screen, which will provide 19 centerline miles of new barrier-separated express lane in westbound direction only. It will also provide I-285 westbound to State Route 400 northbound express lane connection, and also I-85 southbound express lane to I-285 westbound express lane connection. So approximate limit for the Phase 1 will be on I-285 from Henderson Road to Northside Drive, and on 400 from Johnson Ferry Road to Abernathy Road. GDOT has established a best value selection criteria for this procurement, which including a best value for Phase 1 and evaluation of the project development and delivery approach for the remaining phases. So here's a quick overview of our procurement activities that completed so far. We hosted Industry Forum in August 2024, and we advertised request for qualification in September 2024. We received multiple statements of qualification in December 2024, and from December to now, our multiple evaluation team reviewed the statements of qualification and came up with a short list of proposers. So this morning, we had P3 Steering Committee meeting, and committee approved a short list of these 4 teams. 285 East Beach Partners, East Perimeter Partners, Gateway Mobility Group, and Top End Mobility Group. So at this time, I want to take a moment and acknowledge that this SOQ review took significant effort and time commitment from our evaluators and advisors. So I would like to thank them for their excellent work. I'll give a minute to soak in the slot names on your screen.
Yep.
So our next step will be to develop a RFP. An RFP will typically include instruction to proposers, technical provisions, reference information, project agreement, CDA, and tolling agreement. Our goal is to send this draft RFP to the shortlisted teams end of March. And this concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Haral. Is there any questions from Haral?
Yeah.
Lots of work, and I tell you, they have worked hard. We're very thankful to have a team that we have here for this type of projects.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd like to call the Property Utilization Committee to order, and I'd like to call on our own Chief Engineer, Meg Perkle, to present the next presenter.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to introduce Greta DeMeo, the Executive Director of the PATH Foundation. Since its founding in 1991, the PATH Foundation has been making Metro Atlanta a better place to walk, bike, and live. PATH has built more than 325 miles of multi-use path trails, making a huge difference in the quality of life of Georgians. GDOT and PATH have successfully partnered on many impactful projects. Greta DeMeo is a professional landscape architect and has spent her 30-year career in Metro Atlanta, providing planning and design for greenway trails throughout the Southeast. Greta joined the PATH Foundation as its executive director in January of 2020, and I'm excited to welcome her to GDOT today to hear about the latest happenings at the PATH Foundation. So welcome, Greta.
All right, is everybody awake? Ready for some fun conversation today? I did not bring the Kool-Aid, but I tell everybody that I do drink the trail Kool-Aid. So after the other committee updates, I think we all could use some coffee on a day like today. But Commissioner McMurray, thank you for all you're doing and everyone here on the committee. I'm not going to take a long time, but I'm just excited when actually Megan and Andrew, who's not here, ropes me in, and he's like, I'm not going to be here today. So just to rehash some of what PATH is and how we have partnered throughout the years. And so it really became exciting when I started looking at the history of PATH. PATH as a nonprofit started in Atlanta in 1991. And so we're on 34 years come August this year of helping to build trails throughout the metro Atlanta area, but also throughout the state of Georgia. And so as we look at that, there's always a benefit of a public-private partnership for us to be able to get private money and come together with local, state, federal funding to make things happen. And so that really is how we've been able to even get those markers of 327 miles of trails built to date. So when you look at, we've worked with multiple communities throughout the state, throughout the southeast even, gone all the way down to Fort Lauderdale and Jacksonville, Florida, all the way out to Mississippi, to South Carolina, but primarily our focus really is Georgia. And so, again, we do capital campaigns, we put projects together, we're always strategizing on money. So, you know, I hope at the end of my talk we can talk about some money. So how do we do more with what we have and really create great active transportation connectivity throughout the state? So when I looked back over the past 33 years, it was great to see our founding in 1991, to look at in 1992 how PATH and GDOT, how you guys organized the Transportation Enhancement kind of program, and how the advisory committee came together. And I have to say, some of those first projects that we worked together were a lot easier to deliver than today. But anyway, it was a fun time to do that and to really partner on one of our first projects, which was what we refer to as the Silver Comet Trail today. So how many have been on the Silver Comet Trail? All right, all right. How many don't know what the Silver Comet Trail is? All right. So the Silver Comet is a connected trail. It was a corridor that you hear, the GDOT, I don't always use the right terms, Commissioner, but state properties, GDOT, you owned the corridor. We partnered to be able to put a trail that went from Alabama all the way, Paulding, Polk counties, all the way through Cobb County, and it kind of ended. It was about 90 miles. Our partner over in Alabama extended their portion of it. It's called the Chief Ladega Trail, all the way into Anniston, Alabama. And so when you start looking at that getting underway in about 98, and then our completion of that, took about 10 years to get all that together. Lots of partners, lots of individuals. There's not anything that PATH has done where we've done it on our own. It's always been in a big, huge partnership with state, local government. And so you look at that and look at the impact, and then today, we're building right now in Atlanta the extension of that Silver Comet. So it's coming all the way into downtown. Centennial Olympic Park, even all the way out to Stone Mountain. So you'll be able to go from Stone Mountain, Georgia, all the way to Anniston, Alabama, and we're working towards the World Cup, so everybody has that as their deadline. But then, you know, I looked forward and I saw too, the next project that we really aligned well together was the Georgia 400 corridor and what we call our Path 400 trail. How many of you have been on the Path 400 trail or heard of it? Okay, great. Well, we're building right now together with some of the money that you've been so grateful to kind of partner with us, extending north. We're about to start construction that'll take that trail to the Sandy Springs, City of Atlanta border, and working directly with City of Sandy Springs. Your interchange project was part of our influence too. You see that on the list back in 2015, looking at how to not preclude trails. And so when we start looking at the express lanes on 285 and things like that, we just always want to think about, you know, how do we have good active transportation connectivity so that we don't preclude that. You know, it's not something that we think that it should all roll into the same bucket, but at the same time just being forward thinking, and you guys were. So if you go up there today, I don't know if everybody's aware of the trail. Take Georgia 400 north right before 285. Everybody's familiar with Northside Hospital on your right, and you'll see that trail right there with the pedestrian lights. Right now, it's not really tied in because we're building to that point, but here pretty soon we're going to have connectivity that regionally breaks through the perimeter on that top end with trails. Kind of bring Sandy Springs and the City of Atlanta together, City of Dunwoody together. And the bridging of our highway systems like that is so important for local communities to stay connected. So with that, I think I got in our big hurrah. So I should let Commissioner McMurray really give this one because, wow, sometimes it takes a while to get things to happen, and we persevered with working with CSX, and we extended that Silver Comet, that 2.3 miles on the corridor that GDOT was able to acquire from CSX under that agreement. So that's been built. We are ready to go. We had the contractor on board. I just kept saying, give us the green light. So we finished that last year, and just really glad to continue to extend the Silver Comet. So here's a little bit of a map that just kind of shows some of what PATH currently in red is building in the metro area. A lot of that is in the City of Atlanta, and a lot of that is with local funding that the city's T-SPLOST is bringing for trails. But you'll see the Path 400 project there that I was talking about, and that does have some of your state funding. So here's the connection. You'll see in the upper left-hand corner, that's that 2.3 miles that we just built with you to be able to extend the Silver Comet from the east-west connector right there in Cobb County and bring it closer to the river. The portion that will bring it to the river, Cobb County is building with their own SPLOST funding. That's underway. And then we've got a little bit of a neat amendment to this where Mayor Dickens really wanted to get everybody to the city's riverfront by the World Cup. So that's what you're seeing there, that we're about to start construction that then allows you to kind of spur off the Silver Comet connector and actually come down to the Chattahoochee River. So we have all of this underway. We're just very grateful that our budgets that we set, we just got bids for the portion that's the southern red part, and it was within budget. So that is always a good thing. Here's a view of the 2.3 miles. When we were pouring concrete, we used a slip form machine, and we poured as much concrete in a day as those concrete machines could bring to us. It was really a great opportunity. We had a time-lapse video if anybody reaches out to me, I'll send you the link to it, just to see all the concrete trucks coming and pouring along the Silver Comet Connector. There's another shot of a few of them. And then if I just quickly jump over to Path 400, here's a little bit of an update on what we're doing with the southern part, that Wayuka to Lordens, which is a great project. I'll show you some pictures after this slide of how we're going under Georgia 400 right there at Mountain Way Commons. But because of the terrain and the topography, we're having to do some amazing bridge structures ourselves for the trail. The next section from Lordens to city limits is about to be underway. And then we're working with Sandy Springs as they're probably coming back and I don't know, Commissioner McMurray, if they're asking for more money, because I think their estimate is a little bit over their budget right now, so they'll be looking for some additional funding. But this is a view looking south back to City of Atlanta, kind of Buckhead area in the background. That also is Wayuka Road is what you're seeing there. And then this is going under Georgia 400, the way we had to build the wall systems to be able to get the multi-use trail to come under and then launch onto our own bridge in the background there. This is the bridge that then spans across Mountain Way. And Mountain Way is kind of a neighborhood connection. There's also a spur that goes down so that everyone that lives in this area of Buckhead can have ease of access to the trail. And then here's another view of that bridge. Don't worry, it's getting railings. So, yeah. It's like, oh my goodness, do not get on that right now. Yeah. And then this is looking north towards Sandy Springs and kind of looking at our connection there to Lordens Drive. Another thing I just wanted to mention is the City of Atlanta, we're looking at a new vision for the city. So we've got lots to do ahead, and this should be on City Council's agenda in June for adoption. We worked all of last year to kind of outline how do we get Atlanta to be the most trail-connected city in the country, and what do we feel that is. And so what this represents are opportunities to make the city more walkable, bikeable, and to get 93% of the population in the city within a 10-minute access to a trail. So this will take a while to do. The red is what we're kind of socializing with City Council currently as model projects that would come out of the master plan. So stay tuned. We're hoping to advocate for the city to have a bigger T-SPLOST on the next ballot in 27 for trails so that we can continue to build out the city's trail system. And then I could not talk about our partnerships outside of Metro Atlanta. So I'm just going to feature a few, and I know some of you represent different areas within the state. This one is Noonan. Our secondary mission is we help communities get trail systems going. That starts with doing a master plan. We did the master plan for Coweta, Noonan area, and out of that had their model projects, which was divided into 4 projects. It was to connect their downtown all the way out to where 85 kind of splits the city. And so, of course, we worked directly with you guys. With GDOT, with the district office, with the bridge office to be able to put a bridge across 85. Again, we're looking at overcoming the barriers of our highway systems when our communities are divided by them, and how to safely get the community connected on a human scale so that they don't have to get in their car and sit in traffic to go from one area in the city to another. And this was just a great way of doing that, because all the intersections with 85 in Noonan are just very congested. I wouldn't want my children, I wouldn't want my family trying to walk or bike from one side to the other. And this is a safe way now that they're connected to both sides of the city. And we go under roads. So we really want to stay away from all these roads projects you guys are moving forward. That's what the community is telling us. We want safe and inviting ways to stay away. So let's look at safety, let's look at ways to separate the two. Then we come over, so I see Kathy sitting over here. We have not met, but a friend of mine told me you would be here. So we have just so enjoyed Columbus and what Columbus has done over many years before we even came to help them do a master plan to connect their rail trail that was already built to the Riverwalk that was already built, and then how to fill in and make the city more walkable, bikeable. So if you have not been to Columbus, you need to go to Columbus and really experience the beauty of the Chattahoochee River along their city edge and how that was built with an infrastructure project. So it's really a great example of what can be done when you have storm sewer that needs to be upgraded and you can piggyback other things with that. So just a couple of pictures there. I love Columbus too because even the road grid is excellent. You don't have the congestion that we have. Good road grid is the greatest thing in the world. And they have wide sidewalks and they're set back from the road. You have these natural buffers. So it almost has every street, kind of the uptown area, being a trail in a sense. And then we're working with LaGrange. So has anybody been to LaGrange's trail system? Oh, okay. So it's LaGrange Thread, and they've been doing an amazing job building out their trail system and really getting, again, using a lot of local funding to really feed back into their community and make their city more walkable, bikeable. So it's got a great brand. They were originated as a mill town, thus the Thread. They wanted to be able to really bring community together. So the branding was very historic and really reflective of what they wanted this trail system to do. And they intertwine with all the schools, connecting schools to commercial areas, to parks, and really lots of neighborhoods. And then I'm almost at the end. I don't know, I didn't bring my watch up here. But another regional thing, if you're over representing kind of the east side of Georgia, we've been working with the Georgia High-Low. We did a master plan last year. This is a big vision. This is 210 miles that would have to come together to make this happen. But we've got a plan. Right now we're working with Effingham County to be able to look at a corridor that was a former rail corridor and to be able to work with Georgia Power, who owns it currently, to also have a trail along it. So anyway, I'll stop right there. I hope that if there's any questions, I haven't run out of time. And if I have, this is my contact. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions.
Members, are there any questions or comments for Ms. DeMaio? Thank you very much. And I want to say, on a very selfish note from Columbus, thank you for all PATH has done for our Dragonfly Trail Master Plan. These trails are great sources for exercise as well as recreation, but they also provide very legitimate transportation alternatives, because in Columbus, I can't tell you how many soldiers utilize our Riverwalk to get to work and back on their bicycles or to jog. It is truly a transportation alternative, and being able to extend Dragonfly Trail with the help of PATH has been very beneficial for our community. So I appreciate the presentation as well as what you've done for us. Mr. Lewis, did you have a question?
Yes. I'm just curious, on any of these trails anywhere, perhaps more in a rural setting, are there any camping options or opportunities? And if not, might be one day?
The great thing is a lot of these small towns that we're connecting, and even when you're looking at inactive corridors and acquiring some of that and doing more of a rail trail conversion, it spurs that. So we consider our trails as a canvas for the community to really benefit and draw their own art. And so whether it's a bed and breakfast, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a camping area, We like to see when those things come in after us, because that really shows that the community has embraced what has been built and they're making it their own. But I wouldn't say that we don't. If we come through like a state park, we're always looking at how to design it to the destinations that the trail user would need or want to go to. We primarily will look at rest areas, little bench areas, and how often do we put those, just because we're designing for all ages, all abilities, and we know every now and then we have areas that we need to stop and rest. But good question.
I will tell you that in Columbus, our trail actually goes through a historic mill property in the middle of it, in the middle of these two buildings. One has been repurposed as a boutique hotel, and the other is a restaurant, yoga studio, et cetera. And the trail runs through these two buildings. And at the southern end, at the Fort Moore end, there's an RV park has been started. So yeah, it's a great economic development tool as well for all kinds of things. Any other questions or comments?
I'm sure.
Yes, Mike. Sorry.
Commissioner, you can go first.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you, and thanks to Path and the great partnership. She went through a lot of projects, and if you really ask her where did we start, pretty much every answer was no. Especially Path through 285, 400, one of the most congested interchanges in the nation. But Path is small but mighty, as you can see by what they've done. And we have total confidence that when they start something, we know they deliver, they take care of it, and it's done with excellence. And so we just want to say thank you, Greta, for the partnership. She mentioned that last extension of the Silver Comet Trail, and with an eyesight, I can't not thank Annette Similero enough. Working through the legality of that transfer was, we'll just say it was challenging at best and be nice. And so, but certainly a team effort from all of GDOT, but certainly want to thank her and what they do. And again, you can see the great benefits. And just thank you, Greta, for being here and presenting this.
Mr. Gravely?
Yeah, I would echo the commissioner's sentiments as well as Chairman Williams. I'm over, my district is West Cobb up through Hiram into Polk County, and the Silver Comet Trail is a wonderful recreational spot for a lot of citizens in our community. My family, my wife and daughters travel that. But also want to say thank you, because I don't see the emphasis in the other states that I get to travel to. The other states aren't doing this. And to have this pathway and the opportunity for families and groups to participate in and enjoy these trails is really a good thing, I think, that Georgia's doing. So thank you very much for putting the emphasis on this and for making them look as good as they do. And I can tell Board Member Lewis, in Paulding County, camping would mean if you just found a tent and a sleeping bag and a patch of grass, that's a camping spot.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I'll end on one note. We really could align and partner this year with what we've been discussing with Norfolk Southern. So I don't know, Commissioner, the best way for me to circle back, but that opportunity of Silver Comet, some of these inactive corridors from Cusseta down to Amerigus is one. Mm-hmm. There's over 100 miles throughout Georgia that I do think the climate is right for acquisition. So, but anyway, thank you so much.
Seeing no other comments or questions, Greta, thank you very much for the outstanding report. And that concludes the Property Utilization Committee.
At this time, I bring the Committee of the Whole to order. And how did that roundabout get there? We have heard that question throughout each of our communities. So today, I bring forward for an overview with the Intersection Control Design Team, Alan Davis, who is with our State Traffic Engineer, and Andrew Pearson, who is our Project Design Concept Review Manager. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and Commissioner. Happy to be here today with you, with Mr. Pearson as well, who will answer this question for you. How did that roundabout get there? We have the answers, I promise. But when two roads meet, that is a paramount question we have to answer. How do we safely and efficiently move traffic through that intersection? It's one of the fundamental challenges of transportation and traffic engineering. What we call this is intersection control. It's a safe and effective management of conflicting movements at a junction. But what does that actually mean in practice? Now, these traffic signals are not in Georgia. I will point that out. But a lot of times, we ask the question, do we put up a traffic signal? That might seem like the obvious solution. We see these everywhere, after all, at intersections, even here just outside our window. But they aren't always the most practical or best answer for intersection control, even if they do make great photos on vacations. A wise man has also said, when in doubt, roundabout. I think y'all have heard that here before. Roundabouts have become more popular in the United States recently, and one of their biggest benefits is their ability to significantly reduce severe crashes. Now, I must confess, engineers have also been known to sometimes come up with some complicated solutions to this question. And no intersection is the same. Context is very important in this regard. But what goes into making that decision? What factors go into determining whether it should be stop signs, a traffic signal, a roundabout, or some of the other innovative tools we use today, like super streets, displaced left turns, or even grade separation? Several years ago, GDOT implemented a process called Intersection Control Evaluation, or ICE, which makes for a great acronym and sometimes breaks out in song in meetings. This new approach changes the way we think about intersection design and ensures that we consider a broad range of data-driven factors rather than just going with default solutions. Andrew will now come up and dive into a little bit of the details of what ICE entails, but the key takeaways are that we're no longer just looking at a handful of inputs to make these decisions. Instead, we're taking a comprehensive approach, one that prioritizes safety above all else, while also considering efficiency, cost, and long-term impacts. Andrew?
Thanks, Alan. So Alan's actually already answered this first question, but intersection control, what is it? It's the establishment of rules and procedures for how roadway users interact at an intersection. So this is vehicles as well as pedestrians or cyclists. Why is it important? It's important to choose a proper intersection control to ensure the safest and most efficient operations of the intersection. So when we are looking at intersection control types, we're looking at a variety of different factors. But first and foremost, it's safety. We're often pulling crash data to collect the number of total crashes, the type of crash, even the time of day that the crash occurred, all to try and find trends to see what we can do to help combat and essentially alleviate those crashes. We're also looking at operations. No one likes sitting in traffic, so we're looking at ways that we can reduce delay along our intersections and corridors throughout the state. So we're also looking at traffic volumes, cost of the projects potentially, roadway geometry, environmental impacts, as well as future developments and projects. So on these next two slides, you're going to see just a list of a number of intersection types. So for unsignalized locations, we've got minor as well as all-way stop controls. We've got various types of roundabouts, many ranging up to multi-lane roundabouts. We've got super street intersections, as well as a right-in, right-out with a downstream U-turn. As far as signalized locations, we've got your traditional signal. We've also got median U-turns. We've got a signalized version of that super street. Displaced left turns, which are also known as continuous flow intersections in some parts of the country. Continuous green T's, and quadrant roadways. And we also have grade separated interchange types as well. So the diverging diamonds you've probably seen throughout the state, as well as single point interchanges and just our standard diamond interchange. So now I'm going to highlight some of our more typical intersection control types. The first being stop controlled intersection. The pros for a stop-controlled intersection is that it's low cost and quick implementation. It doesn't take much effort for us to go out, install a stop sign, and go paint a stop bar on an intersection and take an intersection from potentially a minor stop to an all-way stop. It also has the benefit of being able to reduce delay for the side street traffic. The cons, however, could potentially lead to an increase in rear-end collisions, especially if you have your drivers who aren't paying attention. And then you also have the downside is also the increase to delay along the main line. So you can only imagine if you have a free flow main line, they introduce a stop sign, you're going to get some delay. The next intersection control type I'm going to talk about are traffic signals. The benefits of traffic signals are their low to intermediate construction cost and the ability to accommodate minor movements, as well as the signalization of those turning movements can lead to a reduction in crashes by almost 70%. The cons, we can't just go putting out a traffic signal wherever we think that one may be needed. We've got to meet MUTCD warrants, and I'm going to get into that in our next slide. There's also some downsides to traffic signals are the ongoing operations and maintenance costs, as well as power outages. And I'm sure we've all probably driven through an intersection or a traffic signal when the power is out, and it can get pretty chaotic. No one seems to really know what to do in those situations. So on this side, you'll see signal warrants. So on the right, you'll see 9 signal warrants. As you can find the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Device, and that's a mouthful, I know, so we call it just the MUTCD. This is an FHWA document that was adopted by yourselves, the State Transportation Board, that we follow. And deviating from this manual can lead to some liability issues. And it's also worth saying that just because we meet one of these signal warrants doesn't require that we install a traffic signal. It just lets us know that it is justified. The next intersection control type are super street intersections. Pros, this intersection control can reduce angle crashes by almost 90%. There's also the benefit of low construction as well as low maintenance costs. The downside, though, is the possibility for the increase in travel time as well as travel distance. And you may be wondering, what's a super street? Like, how does it work? So we're going to walk through this intersection. This particular intersection is State Route 515 at Antioch Church Road in District 6. So you can imagine if you're traveling north along this intersection, say you want to go to the food mart at the north side of the intersection. But there's a lot of traffic. So we put in a median. So instead of going straight through the intersection, the signage and the pavement markings direct you to make a right turn. You'll continue along the main line until you get to decel lane for a U-turn movement. And the benefit of the super street is it's cutting, like I mentioned before, it's cutting down the angle crashes, the possibility of angle crashes. So in this position where you're looking to make a U-turn, you only have to worry about traffic coming from one direction, as opposed to if you're crossing from that side street and you have to account for traffic coming in multiple directions. So once you determine that there's an adequate gap in traffic for you to safely facilitate this movement, you can make the U-turn movement and continue along the main line, either choosing to make that right turn back onto the side street or continue along the main line. The last intersection control type I'm going to highlight are roundabouts. And roundabouts can reduce fatal and injury crashes by north of 80%. They're good for speed reduction, and they can operate during a power outage. No power, no problem. And they're also good for reducing the number of total conflict points at any given intersection. Downsides, they're higher construction cost, as well as longer construction times. And then there's also the right-of-way impacts due to their larger nature sometimes to accommodate design vehicles and traffic. So I mentioned conflict points. You may be asking, what are conflict points? Conflict points are pathways where vehicles may cross or intersect. And so essentially, if you're looking at a full access intersection, the typical full access intersection has 32 conflict points, whereas a roundabout has 8. So we're looking at the large reduction in conflict points reduces the potential for crashes at an intersection, as well as the severity of a potential crash. So now that we've gone through intersection types, let's get into the process. What steps do we take to determine the intersection control? Well, we begin with the origination of request. So, myself, I manage our operational improvement program. And so we'll get requests from a multitude of different sources. Sometimes they begin within our office, the Office of Traffic Operations. Sometimes we get requests from the district offices, local governments, yourselves, the Transportation Board, executive management, as well as the general public. Once we get the request, however, we'll take a look utilizing probe data, just typical traffic. We'll take a look at Google and kind of see, is there a project here? Are we seeing an issue? And once we decide to move forward with a project or analyzing a location, we'll go collect our traffic counts and pull out the aforementioned crash data. And once we get that information, we'll use that to complete our intersection control evaluation process, or the ICE process. And our ICE process can be broken down into 2 stages. The first stage being the screening. It's essentially where we'll take the 2 lists of intersections I mentioned earlier, and we'll screen out any locations that we deem to just won't be feasible for that particular location. Once we take our short list of intersection control types, we'll take that to our stage 2. We're utilizing a data-driven process where we'll look at the total project costs, our operational analysis, our safety analysis, as well as environmental impacts. We'll use that to determine our preferred alternative. And then once we determine our preferred alternative, we'll create a T study or synopsis package, further detailing our decision-making process. So now that we've gone through the process, I'm going to walk you through an example of a relatively recent example. The location you'll see on your screen is State Route 54 at I-85. This is an interchange in Troup County, which is in District 3. This interchange currently operates as a stop-controlled interchange at the top of both the north and southbound ramps. So we got a request from the district office asking us to take a look at this interchange. They're seeing a lot of delay in this intersection due to just a lot of development coming in the area. So once we decided to move forward, we collected our traffic counts, we pulled our crash data, we implemented it into our ICE analysis, where we screened out potential alternatives that we deemed infeasible for this location. We moved towards stage 2, where we took our 3 alternatives. We looked at our project costs, our operational analysis, as well as our safety analysis. I also took into account a development of regional impact that was coming in the general area, and so we accounted for those potential traffic volumes, and then we determined our preferred alternative, which in this case was a single lane roundabout. And I know I'm showing one ICE analysis here, but we did perform 2 ICE analysis for both the northbound and southbound ramp as well. Yes, ma'am.
In this scenario, your first alternative and your second alternative scored fairly close, 5.9, 5.6. Do you put into the evaluation any potential growth that's anticipated to determine if perhaps the multi-lane might accommodate more traffic down the road if there is growth projected? How does that come into play, or is it just point in time?
Yes, ma'am. So we also look at, I don't know if on the screen you can see it, but in the middle with the traffic operations, so we're showing the analysis for what we call our design year, so it's 20 years out. So we're also taking into account our design traffic as well as our build traffic when the intersection will be constructed. All right, so after we complete our ICE analysis, the Ops Improvement Program has a slightly different kind of way we get projects approved, but we'll generate our T study, our synopsis package, this is the cover sheet, which you'll see in front of you. You also see the benefit cost analysis near the bottom of this sheet. Just kind of gives you a range of what the bang for your buck you're getting as far as from an operational improvement standpoint. 28 is actually pretty solid number for us, where our baseline, we try to keep the baseline around 10. So after we generate our TE study or our synopsis package, we'll move forward with design and ultimately construction. So hopefully this presentation is giving you guys, the board members, a pretty good idea of how we go about determining our operational, our intersection control at various intersections. So with that being said, I will hand it back to Alan.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
If both of you will wait just a second, so questions can be asked. Yes, Jeff?
Well, before you left, I wanted to take you back to the signal light warrants. You listed 9 different items that a warrant considers. My question is, in order to be granted a warrant, do you just meet one of those criteria, or do you have to meet all 9 of them, or is it a majority of those 9?
Just one.
Just one can warrant us? Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions to Mr. Pearson? Continue.
But that was it. We were ready for questions.
Well, in that case, we'll go back to
Except for
questions.
where the roundabout came.
Anyone else? I think this was very vital information because we're all seeing certainly an increase in traffic in our communities and the growth that we have since we are a state with great economic strategies that are going forward, and our infrastructure is certainly being looked at, and certainly with this case, the safety is a prime thing that also we say GDOT is all about, as well as our infrastructure. So very timely. So thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you.
We have had the next group to come before us before. We had information brought to us about our proposed rule changes, and at this time I would like to ask Leanne Trainer, who is our Assistant Division Director for Intermodal, as she is already here, to give us an update of where we are within approving these from the board tomorrow. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board committee members, and Commissioner. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today to provide an update on the proposed rule changes and amendments that were first brought to you at the December meeting. So at the December meeting, Division of Intermodal and the Office of Legal Services presented proposed updates to the rules in the grant programs chapter and the licensing of certain open to the public airports chapter. The purpose of these amendments is to update language to conform with current program operations. A synopsis of the proposed rule amendments and a red line document with the revisions were shared at the December meeting and sent to you via email as well. In December, the board voted to open the rules for comments on the proposed amendments. No comments were received during the public comment period that concluded January 13th. Today, committee approval is requested to send the proposed changes to the full board for consideration of adoption. Excuse me. So over the next couple slides, I'll give you a quick overview and summary of the proposed amendments. In the grants programs chapter, a total of 6 transit and rail rules require updates. They're listed here in green. For the transit-related rules, the updates include changing the name and content of the rules to reflect the current FTA, Federal Transit Administration program names, and setting forth updated terms and conditions, eligibility requirements, award criteria, and directions for making qualifying project applications. So mainly administrative updates just to bring everything current to the current federal programs. For the rail-related rule, the proposed changes set forth updated directions for eligible rail lines to request inclusion in the state rail plan. And then updates to 3 aviation airport-related rules listed in blue here are also proposed to provide clarity on scope and purpose, define eligible recipients, further outline criteria for award, and to update application directions and deadlines. And proposed updates to 2 other rules listed in gray in this chapter are also proposed that include repealing the Transportation Enhancement Program rule since this program is no longer offered by the department, and updating the County and City Contract Program rule just to provide full reference to the agency and the board. Additionally, an update to the airport's licensing minimum standards rule is proposed to provide flexibility for airports for the allowance of certain mitigation measures pertaining to man-made obstructions, as long as the mitigation is done in accordance with Federal Aviation Administration requirements. So the next step in the timeline here is for the board to consider the amendments for adoption at the February board meeting. Today, we request approval from the Committee of the Whole to send the rule amendments to the full board. And if the board passes the resolutions to adopt the rule amendments, this would authorize the Commissioner to file the amended rules and regs with the Secretary of State. And final slide. So today, we respectfully request that the committee vote to send the updated rules to the full board to issue resolutions to approve the amendments for these rules.
All right, it's come before the Committee of the Whole today, an issue that we've been working on for several months now. I would like to note that there is a quorum present. So at this time, could I ask for the Committee of the Whole for someone to make a motion within the Committee of the Whole today, and a second, and then we'll have discussion if anyone has one, and then we'll call for the vote. Do I have a motion? Kathy Williams, and a second by Micah Grovely. So do I have any other questions in regards to the motion to send this forward to the full board tomorrow at our board meeting? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes carry, and we have passed this to our full board tomorrow, and it will be taken up then. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
At this time, let me remind everyone that our meeting tomorrow morning starts at 9 a.m., and we will be in the same room, and I invite everybody back to come join us. Yes, Mr. Lewis.
Before you adjourn, Madam Chair, I do have a curious question based on that presentation earlier about how did the roundabout get there, because that whole presentation to me infers just how much more traffic we have in this state than we had probably just a few years ago. So to that end, Commissioner, I'm curious if this department, if we may know, if this is the right way to phrase the question, what our average traffic volume might be on any given day or in any given year in this state, and numerically speaking, and if so, is the increase tracked over a certain time period? I'd be real curious to know what that volume might look like.
Commissioner?
I'll start counting cars this evening, but we can get that. The answer is traffic volumes have rebounded from COVID. Obviously, during COVID, there was a lag and traffic volumes have come back. I was looking at some federal highway data just a few days ago, and again, southeastern volumes are high. So we can look at that. There's a couple ways to look at that. Is probably the best way to look at that is how many vehicle miles are traveled within the state. The rough rule of thumb number had been around 330 million miles traveled every day in the state. So we'll have to see. That data lags, but we can find that and sort of give you a comparator of how we've compared to the last year or two to show how traffic number. That's a day. That's a day. So if you think about it, that's a lot. That's always a good data point to think about, is that amount of miles driven within the state of Georgia in one day. And so that's sort of staggering. Million miles a day. Correct. On all roads, not DOT roads, but county roads, city streets.
That doesn't matter. No, it doesn't matter. I'd be curious to know that number too. If you can find it, Mr. Commissioner.
Yeah, we can get it. Thank you.
Do I have any other comments, remarks? Seeing none, I'll see everyone in the morning at 9 a.m. This Committee of the Whole stands adjourned.
Good job.
Are you gonna go to the Yeah, you're okay.